The Quran teaches that Allah is absolutely one. This idea entails that Allah has no partners or associates in His divinity, an entailment that's often explicitly stated in the Quran, such as when it says things like Allah is the only God, Allah does not have a spouse, and Allah has not begotten any children. Those who say there are other gods in addition to Allah are charged with shirk in the Quran, which is the sin of polytheism or associating partners with Allah, which is the worst sin anyone can commit according to the Quran. Indeed, though the Quran teaches that even rank-and-file Muslims will temporarily go to hell for their sins, anyone who dies upon shirk will never be forgiven and will be consigned to hell forever. Even though Christians, both biblically and historically, do not believe in multiple gods, confessing rather that the persons of the Trinity are not separable beings who are external to each other and subsequently joined together to form some kind of triadic confederacy, but rather three persons who inhere in the one nature or essence of divinity, the Quran, nevertheless, reflecting the fallible and erroneous understanding of its authors and compilers, miscasts what Christians believe and lumps Christians into the category of polytheists or associators. For example, in Surah 4, 171, it says the following, O people of the book, commit no excess in your religion, nor say of Allah aught but the truth. Christ Jesus, the Son of Mary, was a messenger of Allah and His word which He bestowed on Mary, and a spirit proceeding from Him. So believe in Allah and His messengers. Say not, three. Desist, it will be better for you, for Allah is one God. Glory be to Him. Far exalted is He above having a son. To Him belong all things in the heavens and on earth, and enough is Allah as a disposer of affairs. By erroneously identifying Christians as polytheists who speak of three rather than one God, Muslims run into an equally serious charge. By identifying Christians as associators, Muslims are forced to become mutilators of their deity. To fully understand this, we need a bit of background. According to the Old Testament, pre-Christian Judaism, and the New Testament, God's Word in the absolute sense is both eternal and personal. That is, His Word eternally inheres in Him and proceeds from Him, and is not just an abstraction or attribute, but a self-aware subject. This can be seen in the Old Testament in various places, such as when Genesis 3 says that God's Word or voice, the Kol Yahweh Elohim, appeared and spoke to Adam and Eve in the garden. Or in Genesis 15, when we're told that the word of the Lord appeared and spoke to Abram. Or in Isaiah 55, when God speaks of sending forth His word and of His word returning to Him after accomplishing the purpose for which the word went forth. Picking up on this Old Testament motif where God's word is portrayed as appearing, speaking, and acting, ancient pre-Christian Jews often spoke of God's word as a divine person. For example, referring to Passover night, when God came and slew the firstborn of the Egyptians to accomplish Israel's deliverance, the pre-Christian Jewish Book of Wisdom says, When peaceful stillness compassed everything and the night in its swift course was half spent, your all-powerful word from heaven's royal throne bounded a fierce warrior into the doomed land, bearing the sharp sword of your inexorable decree. And as He, the Word, alighted, He filled every place with death. He still reached to heaven while He stood upon the earth. Here, the Book of Wisdom refers to God's Word as an occupant of the divine throne, signifying His rule and authority over all creation. Something also indicated by referring to the Word as all-powerful, and to the Word as the one who executes divine judgment, wielding as He does the sharp sword of God's inexorable decree. In the same book, the Word is assimilated to God's wisdom, and once again is spoken of as personal and fully divine. God of my ancestors, merciful Lord, by your word you created everything. By your wisdom you made us humans to rule all creation, to govern the world with holiness and righteousness, to administer justice with integrity. Give me the wisdom that sits beside your throne. Give me a place among your children. Here, God's word or wisdom is portrayed as seated at God's right hand, and is referred to as the one by whom God made everything and who established man as His vice-regent over the earth. Elsewhere in the Book of Wisdom, God's Word, or wisdom, is said to have been with God from the beginning, is referred to as omnipotent and all-knowing, is called a pure and radiant stream of God's glory, a reflection of eternal light, and a perfect mirror of His goodness and activity. Moreover, God's Word or wisdom is said to be holy and to have given shape to everything that exists. The Word or wisdom is also the source of virtue and all good things, has the authority to forgive sins, is the one who qualifies men to be friends and prophets of God, the one who opens the mouths of the dumb, and who is therefore to be loved and obeyed and honored and more highly esteemed than anything else. In short, God's Word or wisdom is everything that God is and does everything that God does and is to be honored just as God is honored. This is why Emil Schurer, in A History of the Jewish People in the Time of Jesus Christ, could say, "Wisdom is thus not only represented as the special possession of God, but as an assistant of God, originating from His own nature." Another example of this belief among Jews arises in connection with Exodus 3, where someone referred to both as God and as the messenger or angel of the Lord, indicating both his true deity and personal distinction, appeared and spoke with Moses in a flame of fire in a bush on Mount Sinai. In the course of the conversation, Moses asked him for his name. In the Hebrew text, God responded to Moses by saying, "I am that I am. Thus shall you say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you." Significantly, when we look at how ancient Jewish interpreters understood this divine messenger and his words in Exodus 3:14, we find the following paraphrase. "And the word of Yahweh said to Moses, I am he who said unto the world, Be, and it was, and who in the future shall say to it, Be, and it shall be. And he said, Thus you shall say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you." In other words, as the Targum shows, the Jews understood the messenger of the Lord, the one who spoke to Moses and identified himself as God and the great I am, to be another way of referring to God's Word. Indeed, since God's Word is elsewhere portrayed as a divine person in the Old Testament, it's not hard to see why these ancient Jews would draw the inference that the one who spoke and appeared to Moses as God and for God is the Word spoken of elsewhere in personal and divine terms. And here, in the Targum of Exodus 3, they attribute to the Word the work of creation. He is the one who spoke in the beginning, which caused the world to come into existence. In fact, in light of what will be seen momentarily, one should take special note not only of the fact that the Word created the world, but of the phrase that's used in the Targum to express this. The Word said, Be, and it was. That is, the world was a product of the Word saying, Be. Since the New Testament is a confirmation and fulfillment of the Old Testament, it's unsurprising to find that it's fundamentally continuous with this Old Testament teaching. Indeed, in the New Testament, especially in the writings of the Apostle John, who was part of Christ's inner circle and is referred to as the one Jesus loved, we find this same teaching concerning God's Word. Consistent with the Old Testament and Second Temple Jewish belief, John identified God's Word as both fully divine and personal. In John 1:1, he wrote, In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things became through Him, and without Him nothing became that has become. Later in the same chapter, John identified the Word as the one who became incarnate as Jesus of Nazareth. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld His glory, the glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. In the book of Revelation, speaking of the coming of Christ to judge His enemies and vindicate His people, John wrote, And I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it is called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he judges and wages war. His eyes are a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems. He is clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies which are in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, were following him on white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that with it he may strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of the fierce wrath of God the Almighty. And on his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Along with this, we also see Jesus in the New Testament identified as God's wisdom. For example, in 1 Corinthians 1:24, Jesus is referred to as the power of God and the wisdom of God. And in verse 29, it says that believers have been united with Christ, who became to us wisdom from God and righteousness and sanctification and redemption. This is why Colossians 2 can say that all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are to be found in Christ, and is also why the book of Hebrews, in language reminiscent of the Jewish book of wisdom, can say that Jesus, who's seated at God's right hand, is the one through whom God made the world, and he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature. This idea was also taught by Jesus, as can be seen simply by comparing Matthew 23:34 with Luke 11:49. In these New Testament passages, then, we see the same thing said about the Word that we saw previously in the Old Testament and ancient Jewish literature. The Word is a person. The Word is divine. The Word shares the glory or nature of God. The Word occupies the divine throne, is seated at the right hand, created the world, wields the sharp sword of God's inexorable decree, and administers divine judgment. With this background in view, we can now begin to see the almost endless list of problems that emerge from what the Quran calls Jesus in Surah 4:171 and how Muslims have tried to deal with it. It's well known and easily demonstrable that Muhammad heard and overheard things spoken by Jews and Christians, not to mention pagans, and incorporated them into the Quran, often quite uncritically, which is just to say, without having a true understanding of their overall meaning. Although it's the point of Surah 4:171 quoted earlier to say that Christians have gone to an extreme or an excess with regard to Jesus, and so to deny his deity and the doctrine of the Trinity, in the course of piling up various epithets applied by Christians to Jesus, Muhammad ended up calling Jesus not only a messenger, but also Allah's word and a spirit from him. The problem is, of course, if Jesus is God's word, then Jesus is not a creature or a second of three gods, but God's uncreated, eternal, and personal self-expression, a partaker of the same divine essence from which he proceeds forth. This observation put early Muslims on the horns of a dilemma, especially when they encountered knowledgeable Christians who pressed the implications of this title upon them. On the one hand, if one accepts the straightforward implications of this title for Jesus, then it renders the verse self-contradictory. The intent of the verse is to deny the Trinity and deity of Christ. But in calling Jesus the Word, it employs a title that is fraught with divine significance in all the previous scriptures from which this title originates and is borrowed. On the other hand, to deny that Jesus is Allah's Word is to deny what the Quran says about him, and to reject the idea that this is a title that refers to Jesus as a divine person or member of the Godhead means exposing the Quran as fundamentally discontinuous with what God revealed to and through the prophets, not to mention what was believed by ancient Jews and the early Christians. Rather than accept that the verse is contradictory, early Muslims chose the second as the better of two bad alternatives, and said that although Jesus is called Allah's Word, he does not share Allah's nature, but is a separate creation from him. In other words, to affirm what the verse says, they accepted that Jesus is Allah's Word, but to avoid the implications of this, Muslims denuded the title of its scriptural meaning and said that Jesus as Allah's Word is a creation of Allah, something separate from him. However, as with all bad solutions, this attempt to explain the title by departing from its established meaning in the previous scriptures leads to a devastating problem. One first pointed out in the 8th century by John of Damascus, a Christian who lived under Islamic rule and who's one of the earliest witnesses we have on Islam, even earlier, in fact, than the vast majority of Muslim sources, such as the Sirah literature of Ibn Yitzhak or Ibn Hisham, or the hadith collections of men like Bukhari and Muslim. In his book, The Fount of Knowledge, in a section that deals with heresies, one of the views that John looked at is what he called the heresy of the Ishmaelites, a term used at the time for Muslims. With respect to the Ishmaelite heresy regarding Christ, John wrote, "We say to them, since you also say that Christ is the Word and Spirit of God, why do you accuse us of being associators? For the Word and the Spirit are inseparable from the one in whom they exist by nature. Therefore, if the Word of God is in God, then it is evident that He is God as well. If, however, the Word is outside of God, then according to you, God is without Word and Spirit. Consequently, by avoiding the association of a partner with God, you have mutilated Him. It would be far better for you to say that He had a partner rather than mutilate Him and treat Him like a stone, a piece of wood, or some inanimate object. Thus, since you falsely call us associators, we will in turn call you mutilators of God." To escape this observation, Muslims, ever since the time of John of Damascus, have tried, by hook or by crook, to deny the plain statement of the Quran that Jesus is God's Word. The most popular maneuver of Muslims is the ad hoc claim that when the Quran says that Jesus is the Word of Allah, it doesn't mean that He's Allah's Word, but is referring to Jesus as a product of Allah's Word be. For example, 100 years after John of Damascus, Ahmed bin Hanbal, a leader of the traditionist school of Islam and founder of one of Islam's 4 prominent madhabs, is reported to have said, "But what Allah means when He says the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, is only an apostle of Allah and His Word which He conveyed into Mary, is that the Word which Allah cast into Mary was His saying, be. Jesus was therefore brought into being by be, but not Himself that be. Be is God's Word and is uncreated." So according to Ahmed bin Hanbal and the traditionist school, when Allah said that Jesus is Allah's Word, what He meant to say, or what He should be understood as saying, is that Jesus is not Allah's Word, but something created by Allah's Word. This convoluted explanation is supposedly based on other statements of the Quran, where it speaks of Allah creating things by saying be, as we see in places like Surah 2, 117. To Him is due the primal origin of the heavens and the earth. When He decrees a matter, He says to it, be, and it is. This language is even used of Allah causing the virgin birth in Surah 359, and as one can see, although this way of describing Allah's work of creation is consistent with how God creates or causes things to happen according to Genesis, its specific manner of expression clearly derives from the Jewish Targums. It's in the Jewish Targums, such as the Jerusalem Targum's rendering of Exodus 3:14, cited earlier, that we read of God saying, be, and it was. However, as should also be seen, when Ahmed bin Hanbal and other Muslims say that Jesus was a product of God saying be, and not Himself the Word who uttered the saying, they end up turning the Targum on its head. For in the Targum, it's the Word who says be, rather than the Word being a product of God saying be. Moreover, this attempt to explain Surah 4, 171 has holes in it large enough for several caravans to pass through, and makes Muslims look like exegetical geckos on the hot desert sand. First, in Surah 4, 171, Jesus is not said to be a product of Allah's Word. Rather, He is pointedly said to be His Word. If Jesus is not Allah's Word but a product of it, then the Quran is not a clear book, is far from a literary miracle, and Allah does not know how to communicate. So unless one wants to deny the fundamental clarity of the Quran, this is clearly intended as a title for Jesus. Moreover, numerous ahadith likewise support that this is a title for Jesus, a title of distinction, one that sets Him apart from others. Evidence for this can be found, for example, in the well-known and multiply attested hadith, where people on the day of resurrection will grow increasingly worried as they await the commencement of the judgment, and so they'll go to various people to seek their intercession. They'll go to Adam, who stands out as the one Allah made with His own hands, to Noah as the first prophet sent to all nations, to Abraham, who was the friend of Allah, to Moses, the one Allah spoke to directly, and to Jesus, Allah's Word, and a Spirit from Him. So both the Quran and the Sunnah clearly use this as a title for Jesus. Second, Jesus is not only called Allah's Word in 4:171, but the verse says that Jesus was His Word bestowed upon or conveyed to Mary, and that He was a Spirit from Him, which presupposes that He was Word and Spirit from Allah prior to His virginal conception, the latter of which was brought about by Allah saying be. This too is confirmed by the previous hadith, which referred to Jesus as Allah's Word and a Spirit coming from Him. Third, if it were the case that Jesus was created by Allah saying be, and this justifies calling Him Allah's Word, the actual language of 4:171, then by the same token everything could be called the Word of God, and this verse wouldn't be telling us anything distinctive about Jesus. This latter fact is even pointed out by the Muslim scholars who collaborated to produce the Study Quran. In the note on Surah 4:171, the Study Quran points out that Jesus alone is called Allah's Word, and it even points out that someone could argue that this entails that Jesus as the Word was involved in creating by the word be. Some commentators interpret His word here as an allusion to the divine creative command be, by which Christ was formed in Mary's womb. However, while all created beings are brought into existence through God's Word, Christ alone is specifically identified as a word from God. Some might argue, therefore, that Jesus, by virtue of being identified as God's Word, somehow participates uniquely in the divine creative command, although this is not the traditional Islamic understanding of Jesus' identification as a word from Him. Fourth, if the Quran does not teach that the Word of God is an eternal divine person and does not teach that Jesus is the Word, then the Quran, contrary to its claim, is not continuous with the Old and New Testaments, and Muhammad then did not bring the same message as all the prophets. The idea that the previous scriptures have been corrupted is not taught in the Quran, and even if it were, it would only end up undermining any ability to confirm that Muhammad brought the same message as the prophets apart from his own say-so, for which he would then be his only witness. Fifth, if we ignore the fact that Surah 4:171 explicitly calls Jesus Allah's Word, or if, for the sake of argument, we accept the so-called traditional understanding, which can't even be traced back to Muhammad, and say that Jesus is not Allah's Word, but a product of His command be, this wouldn't resolve the fundamental problem pointed out by John of Damascus. It would only relocate the problem, for we would still have to ask, if Jesus is not Allah's Word, but a product of His Word, what then is the nature of that Word and its relationship to the Quran, since both are identified as Allah's speech? And what is the relationship of Allah's speech to Allah Himself? Once Muslims began to ask these questions, John's argument came back with a vengeance and led to the rise of strident differences and fierce sectarian rivalry among Muslims regarding Allah's speech. In the early centuries of Islam, the view that initially held dominance was that of the Mu'tazilites, who said that Allah is absolutely one and does not have a plurality of attributes distinguishable from His essence or from each other, including the attribute of speech. And therefore, Allah's word be and the Quran were creations external to Allah. This led other Muslims to say they were guilty of deflating or divesting Allah of His attributes, such as Al-Bayhaqi, who spoke of those of the Hanafis, Malikis, and Shafis that do not go the way of divesting Allah of His attributes as the Mu'tazila do, nor the way of likening Allah to creation as the Mujassima do. To say the Mu'tazilites were guilty of divesting Allah of His attributes is just another way of saying they were guilty of mutilating Allah and turning Him into a dumb idol. Over against the view of the Mu'tazila was that of the traditionists, who said Allah does have attributes, including the attribute of speech, not to mention a face, hand, shin, and so forth. And the Quran, as Allah's speech or word, they said, is eternal. At the same time, since the traditionists identified Allah's speech as an attribute of His being rather than as His simple essence, they necessarily also thought of the Quran as something other than Allah, though inseparably joined to Him. As Al-Bayhaqi said in the course of quoting an early traditionist, Ibn al-Mubarak said, "I do not say that the Quran is the creator, nor that it is created." This is the position of the Salaf and Khalaf among the major scholars of Hadith. So while the Quran is not created, it's not Allah, but something additional to Him. Hence, in their effort to avoid mutilating their deity by ripping out His metaphorical vocal cords, they associated the Quran with Allah as an eternal reality coexistent with Him. That is, they compromised divine unity and became associators. In fact, this is exactly what the Mu'tazila said in response to the traditionists and others who affirmed that the Quran is Allah's eternal speech, neither creator nor created. The Mu'tazila, among the earliest groups of thinkers identified by their rationalist approach to Islamic doctrines, held that the Quran was created. As such, it is to be distinguished from the divine essence, which is unitary, simple, eternal, and unchanging. The Quran is the Word of God, created in time for humanity. Opponents of the Mu'tazila held that the Quran was uncreated, part of the essence of God. To the Mu'tazila, this position appeared to compromise divine immutability, and thus divine simplicity, and ultimately divine unity itself. In an attempt to avoid the pitfalls of either view, later Muslims like Al-Ash'ari and Maturidi, who represent what came to be the majority view among Sunni Muslims, charted a so-called mediating position, one that tried to affirm Allah's speech without falling prey to the pitfalls inherent in either the Mu'tazilite position or the traditionist position. However, upon analysis, their abortive efforts accomplished nothing of the sort. What they ended up doing is retreating into irrationalism, saying that the Quran is eternal and uncreated, but is neither Allah's essence nor other than His essence. For example, note how Hamza Yusuf, an Ash'arite Sunni Muslim, in his commentary on the creed of Imam al-Tahawi, an Ash'arite creed, describes the position that arose in opposition to that of the Mu'tazila and became Sunni orthodoxy to the present day. At its simplest level, the Mu'tazilite creed involved 5 fundamentals. The first was unity, by which the Mu'tazila meant more than simply the Tawheed that Sunni Muslims understood, one God as opposed to many. The Mu'tazila insisted that God's attributes had no existence distinguishable from His essence. Their negation of God's attributes arose from their concern regarding the Sunni position. The Sunnis, in turn, responded to the Mu'tazila, arguing that the attributes were in addition to the essence in such a way as to be neither the essence nor other than the essence. This was a supra-rational attempt at avoiding the polytheism of which the Mu'tazila accused them. For the Mu'tazila, this affirmation of hypostatic attributes approximated the orthodox Christian argument of a triune God that was closer to polytheism than monotheism. When Hamza Yusuf says the view of the Mu'tazila arose from their concern regarding the Sunni position, he's misspeaking. The view of the Mu'tazila preceded the teaching of Al-Ash'ari. In fact, Al-Ash'ari was at first a Mu'tazilite before he eventually left their party and came up with his own view, the view that later became Orthodox Sunnism and gained ascendancy. But more interesting than that is Hamza Yusuf's admission that the Ash'arite position is a supra-rational solution, which is just verbal legerdemain, a clever way of talking around the fact that Al-Ash'ari's position is irrational. Indeed, to say that Allah's attributes, inclusive of His speech, are neither the essence nor other than the essence is not merely paradoxical, but violates a basic law of thought, the law of excluded middle, which says that something can't be in the middle between its affirmation and negation. In fact, this is the very observation that Al-Ash'ari himself made about the view of another Muslim named Abu Hashim, who tried to solve the problem of Allah's attribute of speech and other attributes by saying that Allah's attributes are modes that could be described neither by existence nor non-existence. In his criticism of Abu Hashim, Ash'ari repeats the argument already raised by the Mu'tazilites against the theory of modes, namely that it is contrary to the law of excluded middle. His argument, as reported by Shahrastani, reads as follows: the assumption of an attribute which can be described neither by existence nor by non-existence is the assumption of something which is in the middle between existence and non-existence, between affirmation and negation. But this is something absurd. And so, since Al-Ash'ari's view violates the law of excluded middle, it's likewise absurd. It's little wonder, therefore, that Hamza Yusuf, in his description of the Sunni approach to theology in the pages leading up to his comments about the supra-rational character of the Asharite view, said, "True theology is to a certain degree the squaring of a circle within an enlightened mind." In other words, while this kind of talk might cause enthusiastic applause from Buddhists, clapping with one hand of course, Sunni theology is about as rational as a Zen koan. The significance of what has been said up to this point should not be missed. All of this means that Islam is false. False not only when judged from the perspective of the Old Testament and the New Testament, but also false when judged by its own decrepit standards. In an attempt to defend Tawheed over against their misguided understanding of the Trinity, Muslims either end up mutilating their deity and exposing Allah as a mute idol, or they end up associating a partner with him, which is also idolatry. And so by their own standards, Muslims are either mutilators or associators, and in either case, they're idolaters, those guilty of shirk, the worst of all sins according to the Quran. The same Quran that commits them to this hopelessly idolatrous and unforgivable position.